When the Charlie Hebdo attacks took place in Paris following the publication of offensive cartoons of the Prophet Muhammad in 2015, the world stood by in shock as two suspects killed and injured dozens of people in revenge for the provoking and quite frankly unnecessary publications in the satirical magazine. 5 years on, and it seems that the French have not learned from the delicate mistakes of the past, as following a republication of the cartoons, yet another incident has taken place outside the now defunct Charlie Hebdo offices in the 11th arrondissement of Paris, seeing a new suspect charged with attempted terrorist murder. The incident also comes at a time where 14 other suspects are in the docks at a high-security trial for having been involved with, aiding or abetting the previous attack of 5 years ago, raising the question as to how France chooses to deal with this clearly difficult affair, especially in light of having Europe's largest Muslim population. Yet for France, it's determined to continue with its free press and freedom of speech attitude, which is fine. However, when the language and tones of the articles, speeches and pictures being used become downright offensive, is this really the true definition of free speech that France wishes to embrace?
Quand il n'y a plus de respect, c'est plus la liberté d'expression, c'est une attaque. Et là, c'est clairement une attaque. C'est une attaque de représenter une nouvelle fois un prophète alors qu'ils savent très bien qu'on n'aime pas ce genre de représentation, que c'est humiliant, c'est dégradant, c'est même pas une question de parce que ça va créer des violences, mais moi personnellement j'aime pas, ça me touche.
As for France, the notion of attempting to appease the rise of both internal and external terrorism is something that the government is claiming to take very seriously, with the Ministry of Foreign Affairs' goals in the fight claiming to reduce the risk of terrorist groups' regional hold, combating financial, human and logistic networks of the terrorists, and protecting French interests abroad, something that clearly appears to be letting down French diplomacy. For France, the question now remains as to how it can pick up the pieces of yet another attack and finally learn from the mistakes of the past and understand that respect for race, religion and ethnicity, as well as a whole host of other equal rights, should now be the global norm. As Europe starts to justify its name of Fortress Europe in an ever more imposing way, the problem of security and terrorism is not something that will idly fade out with the closure of ports and borders around the continent. Yet for France, it seems that the policing of its borders with ever tighter measures may not put an end to terrorism, but in fact may encourage further xenophobia as the population of France becomes ever more tired of seeing tens of thousands of refugees arrive in Europe. The rise of the far right in Europe is hence becoming ever more apparent as the wars of Europe start to become tighter to infiltrate, with groups such as National Rally, the EDL, Combat 19 and a host of others gaining popularity at an alarming rate.
Elle a compris que on n'était pas méchants, on était juste là parce qu'on crève de faim. C'est tout. On a faim, on a froid, on a besoin d'argent et l'argent est donné à tous les étrangers, c'est malheureux de le dire.
Add to the problems that Macron is facing at home are the issues surrounding his foreign policy, which as Macron attempts to fill various power vacuums around Europe, as the British fumble about with Brexit, Merkel announces her time's coming to an end, leaving Macron to shout Carpe Diem and Vive la France. Macron has wasted no time in his ambitions to become recognised as a global force, with recent statements being made about Belarus, claiming that France insists that President Lukashenko steps down and that Lebanon obey his barking orders to start a new government, carrot-and-stick diplomacy that raises the question as to just who Macron thinks he is. With Macron clearly stoking the fire on the international arena, is it then only a matter of time before France creates new enemies abroad, leaving them to deal with issues at home and overseas?